Okay, I guess we should start by introducing ourselves after you, James.
So James Elliot-Square, Regional Business Development Manager in the Middle East. Been in the region for 17 years now. Been doing various different things. Been with Sovereign PPG now for over 6 years.
Fantastic. I'm Nazar Musa. I'm head of market for Qatar and for Saudi Arabia for Sovereign PPG. I came to Dubai for the first time in 2005, so it's 20 years this year.
Amazing.
July this year is 20 years, which is amazing. In and out, spent a bit of time in Singapore for a few years and then in Sydney for a few years, but back in Dubai now. And I've been with initially PPG and now Sovereign PPG for 5 years now. So and we started this sort of little foray into Saudi Arabia properly beginning of last year, I guess.
Yeah, so we first went in to explore the opportunity in 2019, pre-COVID. Were quite aghast about how different it was to the UAE, thinking it was going to be quite similar. We'll come on to maybe a few of the intricacies about that. But then, really went into Saudi probably last year to the year and a half, really.
Yeah, our entry got delayed with the acquisition of Pro Partner Group from the Sovereign Group. But I think it's probably good that it got delayed because it meant that we could enter with a good footing, and also at a time when momentum was on the up, post-COVID, post a lot of changes in the corporate landscape in the kingdom. I think our timing was good. Beginning of last year, timing was good.
I think when it moved from SAGIA, the old SAGIA system, to MISA over COVID, was the precipice of what allowed the kingdom to move forward to that vision of 2030. They got their ducks in a row. They used COVID productively and proactively, and it was really refreshing to see when we went back, compare it to 2019 to where it is now. It's uncomparable.
Yeah, and a lot of international investment, just brought the spotlight back onto the kingdom. But I have to say, when I first went out there to help form our own company there, I used that as a learning tool to see, well, if we need to form in this environment, how's it going to be for our clients? It's improving every day, but it's not easy. I speak Arabic. I've been in businesses for decades, unfortunately for my age, but I just don't think I could have done it without the local support that I managed to get at the time to form our own business.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when I first came to Dubai. So I first came to Dubai in 2008 when everyone was leaving. I was coming in, but even to do a medical back then, it wasn't what it is now. It's it was very old school, going to a medical center in the middle of nowhere. The roads were bizarre. They would change overnight. It wouldn't tell you. Google Maps didn't really exist then, showing my age again. And the Saudi's a bit more like that at the moment, and everything's in Arabic, as you say. So if you don't speak a word of Arabic, you need someone to handhold you through that process.
Yeah, you're so right. I went when I went to do my medical for my Iqama in the kingdom. You go to one place for your blood tests. It's a completely separate place to go and do your X-rays. Completely separate place to go and get your results. And even had I managed to navigate that with my results, Lord knows what I'd have done with them all. Right? So
how do you submit them, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
So that process, I think, but it's Saudi Arabia's changing and growing and opening up so fast that they're going to have to catch up in certain areas. And I think every day we find that it's a bit easier to do this, a bit easier to do that.
So what my experience with the market in Saudi at the moment, obviously I do cover the whole region, so I do have a good understanding of the whole region. But with Saudi, it's not a country where you dip your toe in. You're going in there for a reason. You have to have your company set up. The shareholding of the company needs to be a foreign entity, has to have a year's audited accounts, needs to be in the same sector as you're going into Saudi. Whereas in Dubai or the other regions, it might be a case of, right, let's dip our toe in the water here with a free zone or a different type of entity. And if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. But in Saudi, it's an expensive process to set up there. It's not just the incorporation, and maybe we'll lead on to what all the different parts of the puzzle are. But you certainly need to think about tax. You certainly need to think about the ongoing compliance and making sure the portal system is up to date. Who's going to run that for you? You're going to have to invoice in Arabic. Yeah. All of these things need to be taken into consideration. And then on top of that, you've got Saudization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on sort of the more positive side of the whole thing is they've started with the fact that you can own it 100%. The majority of activities and sectors, you don't really. I remember when I first set up in Dubai, we set up free zone because that's the only way you could kind of have 100% ownership without this convoluted sort of nominee corporate shareholder structure that was quite expensive. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, you can own most businesses 100%, but that doesn't mean that it's attracting SMEs or even startups, because it's not that environment. You have to, as you say, you have to be already formed elsewhere to come into the kingdom. That'll change though. That'll change in the coming years in terms of trying to attract international startup talent. There's a big population, 35, 40 million, of which 65% are under the age of 35. Yeah. So, the kingdom is focused on trying to get their youths to become entrepreneurial and to be the startups.
It's pretty exciting, right? Yeah. If you're a Saudi national now, you've got a real good opportunity there. You've got external foreign multinationals coming into the country. So that presents an opportunity with Saudization to get experience. And I think that's what you need as a young entrepreneur or a young person looking to get into the workplace. You need experience. And if they were trying to get experience in the West, that would be very difficult. And a lot of them have good degrees, and now they need to put to use. So that's a really good opportunity. I would say that with the 2030 vision, to start with the 5149, I think that's what you're alluding to about the UAE, with the nominee structure, that doesn't happen in Saudi, right? So that's what they had to bring in 100% foreign ownership to be able to attract the foreign investment. Which they've done very well. But what I think we should maybe talk about is maybe some of the processes that are involved. So the incorporation side of things, very similar to the UAE and the other parts of the GCC in terms of having to have a board resolution and power of attorney attested in the parent country. And that needs to come over. So that takes a little while. Then you need to obviously go to notarization, and you need to go through the MISA platform if they're foreign, and you've got to go through MOC as well. So that process, how long would that process take, do you think?
I mean, the MISA one is relatively quick. As long as you've got all your ducks lined up and you've got all your paperwork, you can get that done in a matter of weeks. But the real time comes when you're trying to get your commercial registration. And the process as it currently stands is a little bit sort of askew. If you need to have a general manager in place super early during that CR process in order to register with the portals, open a bank account, all the things you would do normally to open a business. But in order to do that prior to the CR, it's quite a challenge because maybe you don't know who that person is. You have to get them into the country. You have to get them in a Iqama. You have to do all that kind of stuff, which delays it even further. So if you were to go down that route, you're talking 3 months.
Probably, maybe more,
process, right? Maybe more.
And that Iqama process for the GM doesn't go through the portal of Kiwa. No. Okay, it goes through MISA, and that's why it takes so long. So that process itself can take 3 to 4 months. Yeah. So that can delay a bank account being opened. That can delay being registered on the portals. And your lease agreement. So those are 3 vital tangents, right? Yeah. So with that in mind, obviously we do offer an opportunity to, in parallel, offer that solution. So that's where there's problems arise, we can obviously offer solutions. So people shouldn't be put off by that, and there are good solutions.
I think it's interesting that we're finding that the majority of our partners who we're helping set up are using our interim general manager service, right? Because initially people will say, no, there's no point. We're going to get John Smith coming in whenever he's coming in. And then as the process goes, it becomes very apparent that it's much more cost effective. It's much more, it's just a smoother process if you've already got a GM in place.
Well, let's think outside the box. If you're a company in Singapore and you're looking to set up in Saudi, you don't know the market. Okay, you've got to employ someone you trust, because the general manager is effectively the CEO of the country. They control banking. They control the opportunity to open up a branch. They can do all sorts there, right? So you've got to trust that person, and they've got to be willing to live in or go to Saudi to do all the setup. So actually having an interim solution is actually, as you say, a cost-effective solution without necessarily the risk per se, because you're doing it through a trusted company like Sovereign PPG. If you had to take your person from Singapore, put them in Saudi, flights, accommodation, the Iqama process for 4 months, plus their salary, which they're going to want a little bit more to go to Saudi at the current rate, that's a significant amount.
That's a very good point. Saudi is still, I mean, you could argue whether it should be or not, but it's still classed as almost as a hardship posting like Dubai was when we first got here. And so there's and also because of the speed of growth of Riyadh in particular, I mean, it's expensive. Hotels are mind-numbingly expensive, and the infrastructure around it means there's gridlock in a lot of cities, in a lot of areas. Sorry, those things happen, I think, as cities develop and as environments grow, and they'll get fixed, and the new train system's been opened, etc., etc. But they're all things that companies have to think about,
Certainly have to navigate.
And, once you're up, once you're running, and you've found a location for whatever your business is, and you've got a GM on the ground, and you've built your business, then you start to have the Saudization and the tax conversations and the portal management and the zakat, etc., etc.
Yeah. So I think that goes back to my initial point of not dipping a toe in the market, right? So you don't go in there and think, right, okay, I'll set up a company and see how it goes. You've got to go in there with a plan and thinking, right, okay, so we've either likely to win a contract or we've got some pretty much guaranteed business coming in, because you have to navigate all of that. The setup costs are more expensive than in the UAE or in Qatar. And the long-term view is to get out of the market. If you were to go out of the market, it's not going to be a quick process either. So I think you've got to go in there with a business plan. You've got to go in there with tax advice to make sure that you're thinking about withholding tax, thinking about potentially transfer pricing in some circumstances, your corporation tax, which is different if you are a non-GCC resident or a non-GCC citizen or a KSA national. And you've also got your VAT, which is more expensive than the UAE, which is at 15% rather than 5%. And obviously, we're not tax advisors, so we can't give that advice, but we certainly can introduce to the likes. But if you get that in place, you're in a really good place to actually make some serious forward steps in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and it's the reason why I think Sovereign PPG, we focus on scale-up businesses that are more than a year old, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 100 years old, that are just looking to come into the kingdom. Ultimately, it's the biggest population in the region. GDP is significant. The whole world now, because of various reasons, if you think about the sporting world, and if you think about, some of the geopolitical things that are going on as we speak. In fact, Mr. Trump is in Riyadh. The world's eyes are on Saudi Arabia, and therefore, with a big market, a lot of investment coming in, and infrastructure development within the kingdom, that's why so many companies are focused on opening offices. And obviously, with the sort of the stick in the sand, I think that's the phrase, that the kingdom said that if you want to operate within Saudi Arabia and do deals with our government, you have to have your regional headquarters in the kingdom. That has moved the needle as well. I think at the beginning of the 2030 plan, they had planned to have 400 regional headquarters in Saudi Arabia by 2030. That number's already above 600. So they've really, really smash that, and that allows companies to try and get some of the deals and tenders on the market with Saudi Arabia.
But what I like about Saudi, and it does cover the whole of the UAE in this regard, they're not scared of changing their way of thinking. So they have a vision, 2030 as a prime example, and they brought out the RHQ vision for that. I think that was 2020, at the end of 2023, January 2023, you had to have an RHQ if you wanted to deal with government tenders, right, above a certain amount. The uptake of that was quite slow because people didn't really understand what they needed to do, how to navigate it. At the time, you had to have an RHQ was not an operational company, and the uptake was slow. But then they quickly realized, okay, well, let's make that RHQ operational as well. So that's come into play. You've had several different attributions added in to the process. Now you can have a license that has multiple different sectors. So services license can be combined with a trading license, or an industrial license can be with a trading license, etc. So it's making it more malleable and more flexible to the foreign investor, so they don't have to have multiple CRs, because that, again, just racks up costs, right? And again, with the ongoing compliance. So I think they've been very flexible in realize, okay, we can't just be totally black and white, 100% this our way or the highway. They've actually worked with foreign investment and gone, okay, that was our idea. Now we've moved it along a little bit and we've evolved. And now, as you see, there's more than 600 RHQs, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. And you're right. And it's a circle, isn't it? Right. So you bring in these regional headquarters, they bring in their teams who work with Saudis. That increases, the demographic split within the kingdom, who then spend more money there, who then invest more money there, etc., etc. So, there's been a lot that's been really, really positive. I've been spending more and more time there over the last sort of 18 months. And I think one thing that's really clear as well is that for Saudi companies and for Saudis, that Vision 2030 is everything that they drive for. Everything that they do, most decisions they make is focused on that. And therefore it means it's real. It's not a sort of fictitious thing that some, McKinsey consultant strategy put together 10 years ago, blah, blah, blah. This is something that everybody is working towards, whether it be in the sports sector, in the health and education sectors, in normal corporate world, in RHQs, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody, whatever they're doing, they ask themselves the question, how does this drive us to 2030?
Yeah.
And that's unique for everything I've seen in the region since I've been here.
Well, I've seen a huge progression, not just on the business side of things. I've seen a huge progression with human rights, with women's rights. So one of my close friends who I went to university with, she's a swim coach over here for many years, very talented. And then she's been taken into the women's Saudi swimming arm, and she's thriving over there. So you're seeing it firsthand, not just on the business side of consultancies going in. This is actually real stuff happening, and it's changing the landscape of the Saudi market for sure. Now, what I would also say is it's quite exciting because we're in the early stages still, and we are seeing consultants, we're seeing contractors, and we're seeing AI technology going in there. We're seeing a lot of AI technology going in there. So they're at the forefront, they're thinking forward. Now, in 2 or 3 years' time, we're also now going to see a lot more of the retail and the actual what you need to actually build cities in the day-to-day scenes, because if you build, they will come. And we've seen that in Dubai, and Saudi have got that vision, and they want that to happen. So it's a very exciting time.
Let's just talk about Saudization for a second, because you brought up the emergence of the female executive. It's not just international women coming in and no longer have to be covered up and all that kind of stuff. The fact that the women are in the workplace now has meant that there's an influx of previously untapped talent that has just appeared from nowhere. 50% of the population again can now work. And we found it ourselves, right? So in our own organization, 1, 2, 3 of we have 3 Saudis in our business on the ground in Riyadh, and 2 of them are female, including our office manager female.
Yeah.
Educated, excited to be coming to work every day, and are now an integral part of the workforce. And that Saudization, it's really important, because if you're going to get your 65% under 35, if you're going to get them thriving in the future, they're going to have to be part of businesses that come in. It can't just be that we bring in a business, we employ 20 people, we fly them in, they stay there, and then they leave in 5-10 years. That doesn't do the country any good. So the Saudization part of it would be a really big problem if you couldn't find the talent. But alongside an influx of 50% more talent, because the women can now work again, is a really a necessity, but it isn't as arduous as sometimes.
I like to see that they're also willing as well, because traditionally, I would say that there's been a disparity between the foreign worker and the local, and that's not just Saudi; that's everywhere. But with Saudi, it's been really refreshing to see how willing people want to work, and they're creating role models for their children as well. So it's just gonna snowball, and it's suddenly going to be a real powerhouse in 2030, 2040. Saudi is going to be a powerhouse.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a list that it's going well for us as a business, and it's going well as a country. But there's also these challenges. I mean, they're growing so fast. Obviously, we just talked about infrastructure, but even technical infrastructure, the government systems around company formation went down and had a dip and took a long time to get back up again. And once you have so much load going into platforms, into all this kind of new technology, it's going to break. And that's definitely happened. When I get on a plane from Dubai to Riyadh, I mean, it's cheaper to fly to London from Dubai than it is to fly to Riyadh. And it's interesting when you get on the plane and you watch who's around you. There's a lot of suits on there, and they're all going on Sunday morning, coming back on Thursday night. All the things that I used to see in Dubai when I was coming on business in the late 90s, early 2000s, before I moved here in 2005, I'm seeing. And I just, every weekend you'll be out for dinner with friends, and somebody would say, imagine if you had the chance of coming into Dubai in 2002, 3, 4, how much, how successful you would be now.
For Saudi,
That's right now for Saudi.
Yeah.
People having the same conversations about Dubai should be now thinking, okay, well, I don't want to have the same conversation in 20 years about not going into Saudi Arabia.
Well, and I think with the Saudi, it's such a bigger market as well. So, I mean, it's existential what could actually happen. And it's exciting. You mentioned the airfares, but Saudi Air, that's going to be exciting as well. Riyadh Air.
The one that's just launching. Yeah, it will be very exciting. And that's an international carrier. And the national carrier, I remember flying Saudi from Jeddah to London, and it would have been about 2000, maybe 2001, and thinking, well, first of all, I was the only person in the whole cabin.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I don't think this is a decision I'm going to make again. And it's lasted with me until last year when I booked a Saudi Air to go to Riyadh, and brand new planes. Clearly, the team on board had been trained from a hospitality background. Plane was full. Great food. It was just, I was like, oh, maybe I got this wrong. And then I thought, well, it's just that one-off flight. So I flew 4, 5, 6 more times. And that's a business that's changed around as well, without competition. Now with competition, with Riyadh Air and with the low-cost carriers flying through the region, and obviously with the Emirates and Etihads and BAs and all these people coming into Riyadh, it'll only get better as well. And then some of the hotels, I've been very lucky to get the chance to go and see some of the Red Sea development and some of the places in Qiddiya and places like that. And I mean, it's world class. It's absolutely world class. I can't afford to stay there yet. They are eye-wateringly expensive. In a few years, maybe I'll treat myself for a night there.
Yeah, it's an exciting place to be. I'm looking forward to going back there soon. So what's the next steps for us?
Look, we've got our foothold on the ground now. We've got a great team on the ground now. The advantage of the Sovereign Group is that with 23 offices around the world in various countries, we can speak to companies in their source market, or as they're making that decision, couldn't I come into Saudi Arabia? We can speak to them there. We can help them, get on the plane and come across, and we can also now help them on the formation part and the post-incorporation part, which is super important now, whether it be company secretarial, whether it be accounting, HR, portal management. So we can really use our global sovereign network to be talking to people at source market, and that'll grow the team on the ground that'll be necessary to support that. I think the first 12 months of trading, maybe the fastest growth in definitely in PPG history, but maybe in sovereign history.
Yeah.
And that's very encouraging. And that's as we not only support businesses that we're helping in Saudi Arabia now, but also as we try and teach our colleagues around the world about the product and how they can help sell it from their markets.
I think there's a few points there. First of all, we're only as strong as our team, right? And I think we need to make sure we double down and make sure we get the right team members to help support all these companies that are looking to come into such an emerging market. I think going back to the point where it is an emerging market still, people are still a little bit hesitant, but as they get more and more confidence in the market, it's only going to grow. And having a partner on the ground like us is only going to help you, because although there are parts of it where you go, well, can I maybe save here or save there? But when you realize that in this part of the world, especially an emerging market, rules change very quickly. We've seen it with UBO declarations. We've seen it with even in the UAE and Abu Dhabi, where every layer of the documentation of your org chart needs to be now attested in Abu Dhabi mainland. So you need someone on the ground, a partner on the ground, who's going to navigate that for you and proactively tell you that you're going to need to think about something that's going to come up. And then on top of that, you need to make sure that you're actually adhering to all the compliance. So yes, we offer the accounting. So we have an accounting team specifically for Saudi and every other region. We have the COSEC services you mentioned, which are really important. Renewal of all your licenses on the portals, making sure that your UBO declarations are done correctly, your audits are done. All of this is so important, because if you fall foul of it, it's not just a rap on the knuckles. It's financial penalties. You won't be able to employ staff. If you're falling foul of the Saudization quota, you're not going to be able to employ staff, renew contracts. You're not going to be able to renew licenses. So everything goes sort of hand in hand.
Absolutely. And
having a trusted partner like us,
and you've got to do it. Ultimately, your GM, whoever is on your trade license, your GM is at risk with all of that, right? So it's very, very important for corporate governance, but it's also as important for the protection of staff and for all the other stuff that goes alongside that. Yeah, look, I think in the next few years our team will build on the ground. I think you said it yourself. I don't know if you can set up your business without somebody holding your hand in Saudi Arabia. Right now, maybe in the future that'll change, but right now, I think it will be incredibly difficult to be Joe Bloggs Co. in the UK and just fly over and try and set up a business in Saudi Arabia without somebody holding your hand.
Well, I mean, it's still difficult to do that here in the UAE, depending on the scale of your company. They have put the things in place in the UAE that enables it. The likes of free zones, which are happening. The zones in Saudi are happening, but they're more complicated than over here. Obviously, they've got a 20-year history, and then over here they've got the entrepreneurial sort of side of things. That will come, I'm sure, but right now it's not there.
No, and also here English is the first language for business.
Yeah,
whereas there Arabic is the first language. And the free zones is an interesting one. I think the free zones in the UAE allowed initially, you could own your business 100% within that free zone. You should only have traded within the free zone, but a number of companies clearly traded outside the free zone as well. In Saudi Arabia, you can already own your business 100%. So then I think what that becomes is it becomes much more of a collegiate atmosphere. So if you have a free zone for technology, all of your tech businesses, you'll be able to share talent, you'll be able to share ideas, you'll be able to work closer together. And I think, and obviously there will be probably tax benefits to be in there, there'll be import-export benefits to being in there, there'll be some freezing of various costs, etc., etc. But the real benefit, I think, sits within the collegiate atmosphere of those free zones at that point. As opposed to what it was in Dubai, where it was, if you're in a free zone, you can own it 100%. If you remember, at that time, in order to be in the free zone, it would cost you more, right? So number of staff was limited by the size of your office and all that kind of stuff. That isn't necessary in Saudi. So as they open, as they develop, that also is going to be an interesting progression.
I think it's open to conjecture still and sort of ifs and maybes. But obviously with free zones and the Saudi rules on trading, with the share cap on the mainland being so high, 30 million Saudi riyals in there for 5 years, potentially that opens up an opportunity for a lot of trading companies to come in and still have a local partner to import it, but they can hold it and they feel more secure that their goods are in a place where they're under control. And potentially, who knows, that might allow them to have the rights for the agency agreements, for example. So there's still a lot to navigate, and it's a lot of unknowns. But it's, again, another exciting
Which is why it's exciting. I was about to say exactly the same thing, which is why it's exciting. Every day is different. Every day there's new challenges, but also new opportunities and new developments. And I'm glad we're there, and I'm glad that the business has taken off successfully. And I'm also glad that there are many, many, many years of business ahead, I think. So look, it's been a really good chat. This is the first time we've done this. And it's quite
naturals.
It's quite easy. Look, one take wonders. I think what'll be really interesting going forward is let's bring some of our maybe some of our partners or our clients who we've worked with. I think if we begin to focus on some actuals, so maybe if we think, maybe we can have a chat about some of the complexities around taxation with our partners, maybe at Orifa or within our own team. It'd be great to do one of these on the road, right? It'd be great to do one of these with the team in Saudi. Everyone gets to meet those guys as well. Maybe we take a camera and we show people around there as well.
Or maybe even bring in a client and see how their experience was, not just with us, but it's also about how their experience was with expanding to a different into different jurisdiction, and maybe some of the pitfalls that they didn't expect, but we had to help navigate through that process. Yeah,
that's a great idea. So I think we're going to do a few more of these. So it's been really enjoyable. Loads that we're going to be able to do in the next few months, both here and on the ground in Saudi Arabia. So thank you, James, and stay tuned to us to watch the next episode.
And the last thing I would say is if you like this, like and share. And that's what they do, don't they?
Yeah, like and share. Tell your friends, don't miss out.